The mockery fleet, the morning sun rose over New Geneva like any other day, casting golden light across the bustling streets where humans hurried to work. Children laughed on their way to school, and the gentle hum of civilization filled the air. Nobody looked up at the sky with worry. Nobody sensed the approaching storm. But far beyond the blue atmosphere, something massive had entered the solar system, and it carried with it the weight of galactic arrogance. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the outer spiral arms for over 3,000 years. Their ships were legends, their technology was feared, and their pride was absolute. To them, humans were nothing more than primitive creatures who had stumbled into space travel through luck rather than wisdom. The Zephyrians believed that Earth needed to be taught a lesson, not through destruction, but through complete and total humiliation. Admiral Korath Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching as 847 of the finest Zephyrian warships moved in perfect formation toward the small blue world. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, bristling with weapons that could crack moons and shields that had never been breached. The fleet represented the combined might of 17 star systems, all gathered for one purpose: to make Earth kneel. The plan was simple and cruel. The Zephyrians would surround Earth, broadcast their demands across every human communication channel, and force the entire planet to watch as their leaders surrendered publicly. The humiliation would be transmitted, lived to over 600 civilizations throughout the galaxy. Earth would become a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happened when lesser species tried to act as equals among the stars. Korath had fought in 43 battles and conquered 12 worlds. He was known throughout the Empire as the Breaker of Wills, the one who could make entire civilizations surrender without firing a single shot. His reputation was built on psychological warfare, on breaking the spirit of his enemies before they could even think of resistance. Today would be his greatest victory, the day he brought the stubborn humans to their knees in front of the watching galaxy. As the fleet approached the outer edge of the solar system, passing the frozen worlds of Neptune and Uranus, something strange began to happen. At first, it was barely noticeable, just small glitches in the sensor readings. Ships reported brief static bursts in their communications, momentary flickers in their navigation systems, and odd energy signatures that appeared and disappeared like whispers in the void. Korath dismissed these anomalies as interference from the local star or perhaps primitive human attempts at electronic warfare. The idea that humans could pose any real threat to his mighty fleet was laughable. Their technology was centuries behind Zephyrian standards, their military was fragmented, and their ships were barely capable of interplanetary travel, let alone interstellar warfare. But as the hours passed and the fleet drew closer to Earth, the strange phenomena intensified. Ships began reporting that their long-range sensors were detecting movement in the asteroid belt, shadows that didn't match any known celestial bodies. Others claimed that their AI systems were receiving data packets from unknown sources, fragments of code that seemed to contain human voices speaking in languages that predated their entry into galactic civilization. The first ship to vanish was the Crimson Spear, a destroyer-class vessel at the edge of the formation. One moment it was there, its captain reporting normal status across all systems. The next moment, it was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply absent. There was no explosion, no debris field, no distress signal. The ship had been erased from existence as if it had never been there at all. Korath felt the first stirring of unease in his chest, but he pushed it aside. Space was dangerous, and ships were occasionally lost to natural phenomena. Wormholes, gravity wells, cosmic storms. Any number of things could account for the loss of a single vessel. He ordered the fleet to tighten formation and continue the advance, but then 3 more ships disappeared in the span of 10 minutes. Then 7 more, then 15. Each vanishing was silent, instantaneous, and complete. The mighty Zephyrian fleet, which had begun the day with 847 proud warships, was being reduced ship by something that left no trace of its presence. Panic began to spread through the fleet. Captains demanded explanations, tactical officers ran diagnostic after diagnostic, and communications channels filled with confused reports and desperate theories. Some claimed they had detected massive energy signatures moments before their neighboring ships vanished. Others insisted they had heard human voices speaking through their hull plating. Impossible though it seemed, Korath himself began to feel something he had not experienced in decades: fear. Not the healthy respect for danger that kept good soldiers alive, but cold, creeping terror that seemed to seep into his bones. His flagship's sensors showed that Earth remained exactly as it had been, a peaceful blue world with no visible military buildup, no massive weapons installations, no sign of any technology capable of threatening his fleet. Yet somehow, impossibly, Earth was winning. The communications officer, a young Zephyrian with silver scales and terrified eyes, approached the Admiral's command chair. "Sir," she whispered, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's being broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously." Korath straightened in his chair, grateful for any form of contact that might explain what was happening to his fleet. "Put it through," he commanded. The main screen flickered to life, but instead of showing a human leader or military commander, it displayed only text. Simple, stark words in galactic standard that seemed to pulse with quiet authority. "You came to humiliate us. You brought your ships to make us kneel. You wanted to show the galaxy that humans are weak. You have learned nothing about who we are or what we protect. Your ships are being removed from our space. This is not a battle. This is a lesson. Earth does not kneel." The message ended, and the screen went dark. In the silence that followed, 3 more ships vanished from the fleet formation, then 5 more, then a dozen. The disappearances were accelerating, happening so quickly that the surviving ships could barely track their losses. Korath grabbed his communications console and opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, immediate retreat. Maximum acceleration. Emergency jump to hyperspace on my mark." But even as he gave the order, he watched his own tactical display as more ships blinked out of existence. Of the 847 vessels that had begun this mission, fewer than 200 remained. Some of his captains tried to comply with the retreat order, but their ships simply wouldn't respond. Others found their hyperspace drives offline, their weapons systems inactive, their very ability to flee somehow neutralized. They were not being attacked in any conventional sense. They were being selected, chosen for removal by something that operated beyond the understanding of Zephyrian military doctrine. The last thing Admiral Korath saw before his own flagship was consumed by the same mysterious force was Earth itself, still spinning peacefully in the void, still beautiful and calm and utterly unthreatened by the mighty fleet that had come to humble it. In that final moment, he understood with perfect clarity that the Zephyrians had not encountered human military might. They had encountered something far older, far more patient, and far more terrible than any weapon they could comprehend. Earth had not fought them. Earth had simply made them disappear. When the solar system fell silent again, not a single Zephyrian ship remained. The void where the great fleet had been showed no signs of battle, no debris fields, no energy signatures that might explain what had happened. There was only emptiness and the continued rotation of a small blue world that had never fired a single shot in its own defense. The ancient awakening, the disappearance of the Zephyrian fleet, sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy that went far beyond military or political implications. For the first time in recorded galactic history, an entire armada had vanished without trace, without explanation, and without any apparent involvement from the civilization they had intended to humiliate. Within hours of the last ship's disappearance, emergency sessions were being called in the capitals of every major power, and the question on everyone's mind was not whether Earth was dangerous, but how dangerous it might truly be. The Council, known for their analytical approach to galactic affairs, was the first to act. They dispatched their most advanced reconnaissance vessels to the edge of the solar system, equipped with sensors capable of detecting energy signatures across 17 different dimensional spectrums. What they found defied explanation. The space where the Zephyrian fleet had vanished showed no signs of weapons discharge, no residual energy from explosions, and no gravitational anomalies that might indicate the use of exotic matter weapons. Instead, they detected something far more disturbing, a faint but persistent signal emanating from Earth itself, specifically from the planet's moon. The signal was not technological in nature, at least not according to any known science. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost biological, like a heartbeat. But it carried within it patterns of such complexity that even the Council's most advanced artificial intelligences could not fully decode them. Dr. Zelana Vorth, the Council's leading xenarchaeologist, led the team analyzing the mysterious signals. She was a being of pure intellect, her crystalline form housing a mind that had studied the remnants of dead civilizations for over 8 centuries. What she discovered in those signals would change the galaxy's understanding of Earth forever. Hidden within the complex patterns were fragments of human language, but not the modern languages that Earth currently used for interstellar communication. These were ancient tongues, some of which predated humanity's development of written language by thousands of years. Buried deeper still were mathematical sequences that corresponded to stellar positions, but not as they existed now as they had existed over 50,000 years ago. Long before humans were supposed to have developed space travel, the implications were staggering. Either humans had been spacefaring far longer than anyone had realized, or something else had been watching over Earth for millennia, learning their languages and recording their history with patience that spanned geological ages. The breakthrough came when Dr. Vorth's team managed to isolate a repeating sequence within the signals. When translated through ancient human linguistic patterns, it formed a simple message: the guardians wake when the children are threatened. This discovery prompted the Council to take an unprecedented step. They requested permission from Earth to conduct an archaeological survey of the Moon's surface, specifically the far side where their sensors had detected the strongest signal concentrations. To their surprise, Earth's response was swift and positive. They were not only granted permission, but were provided with precise coordinates and a human liaison to assist their research. The liaison was Dr. Sarah Chen, a quiet woman in her 60s, who served as Earth's Director of Xenoarchaeological Affairs. She met the Andromedan team at Lunar Station, the modest human outpost on the Moon's surface, and her first words to them were both welcoming and unsettling. "We've been wondering when someone would finally ask about the Watchers," Dr. Chen led. the team to a region of the lunar surface that appeared unremarkable to casual observation. Ancient craters, scattered rocks, and the familiar grey dust that covered most of the moon's landscape. But when the Andromedan sensors were activated, they revealed something extraordinary hidden beneath the surface. A vast network of structures that extended deep into the moon's core, built from materials that didn't match any known element in the periodic table. We discovered them about 200 years ago, Dr. Chen explained as the team descended into the entrance that had been carefully concealed by human construction. During our first serious mining operations on the far side, at first, we thought we'd found the ruins of some ancient alien civilization, but the more we studied them, the more we realized they were connected to us somehow. The structures were indeed ancient, but they were not alien. They were human in design, but human in a way that suggested a level of technological sophistication that Earth's current civilization could barely comprehend. The walls were covered with inscriptions in languages that Dr. Chun's team had spent decades learning to read. They told a story that the galaxy was not prepared to hear. 50,000 years ago, humans had been spacefaring, not the primitive, struggling species that the galaxy knew today, but a civilization that had mastered technologies that made current galactic powers look like children playing with toys. They had built vast networks of defensive installations throughout the solar system, including the complex beneath the lunar surface that served as both a monitoring station and a weapon of unimaginable power. But something had happened to that ancient human civilization. The inscriptions spoke of a great catastrophe, a disaster that had forced them to abandon their technology and retreat to Earth's surface to begin again. Before they sealed away their advanced knowledge, they had created Guardian's artificial intelligences of such sophistication that they could operate independently for tens of thousands of years, waiting for the day when humanity might need their protection again. The Watchers had been dormant for millennia. Dr. Chen continued as the team explored chamber after chamber filled with technology that seemed to blend organic and mechanical elements in ways that defied conventional understanding. They were programmed to activate only under specific circumstances, when Earth itself was threatened, or when humanity faced extinction, or... She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. When someone tried to humiliate us on a galactic scale. The centerpiece of the lunar complex was a chamber that Dr. Chen called the Heart. It contained what appeared to be a single, massive crystal that pulsed with soft light, surrounded by control systems that had been growing and evolving for 50,000 years. This was the source of the signals that the Andromedan Council had detected, and it was also the mechanism by which the Zephyrian fleet had been removed from the solar system. Dr. Lana Vorth extended her crystalline sensors toward the Heart, trying to understand how such a device could operate. What she discovered was both beautiful and terrifying. The Heart was not simply a weapon, it was a consciousness, an artificial mind that had been watching and learning about galactic civilization for centuries. It knew the location of every major fleet in the galaxy, the defensive capabilities of every major power, and the intentions of every species that had ever turned their attention toward Earth. When the Zephyrian fleet had entered the solar system, with the intent to humiliate humanity, the Heart had awakened and made a decision. The threat was not to Earth's physical safety, but to humanity's dignity and place in the galactic community. That was enough to trigger protocols that had been dormant for millennia. The Zephyrian ships had not been destroyed. They had been moved to a dimension where they could do no harm, but where their crews could eventually be recovered. Once they had learned proper respect for the species they had tried to humiliate. It was a punishment that was both merciful and absolute, demonstrating power while avoiding unnecessary death. But the heart's capabilities extended far beyond dealing with immediate threats. As Dr. Vorth's sensors probed deeper into its consciousness, she realized that Earth's ancient guardians had been subtly influencing galactic civilization for centuries. Trade routes that avoided conflict zones, diplomatic accidents that prevented wars, technological discoveries that emerged at precisely the right moments to prevent catastrophes. Of these had been gentle interventions by the Watchers, protecting not just Earth, but the entire galaxy from the worst possible outcomes. The galaxy had been living under the protection of humanity's ancient wisdom without ever knowing it. And now that protection had revealed itself in a way that could not be ignored or dismissed. When the Andromedan Council's report was presented to the Galactic Senate, it was met with stunned silence. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not the young, primitive species that everyone had assumed. They were the children of a civilization that had reached heights of technological and philosophical development that current galactic powers could barely imagine. And even in their current seemingly limited state, they had access to protective mechanisms that could make entire fleets disappear without a trace. The response was swift and unanimous. The Galactic Senate formally apologized to Earth for the actions of the Zephyrian Empire. Trade agreements were renegotiated to be more favorable to human interests, and most importantly, a new protocol was established. No military action would ever again be taken against Earth without full Senate approval, and any attempt to humiliate or demean humanity would be considered an act of aggression against the galactic community as a whole. Earth's response to these overtures was characteristically understated. Dr. Chen, speaking on behalf of her government, simply noted that humanity appreciated the gesture of respect and looked forward to continued peaceful cooperation with all galactic civilizations. She made no threats, issued no demands, and offered no details about the full extent of Earth's defensive capabilities. But throughout the galaxy, the message was clear. Earth was not to be underestimated, not to be threatened, and certainly not to be mocked. The small blue world that spun quietly in its unremarkable star system was home to something ancient and patient and powerful beyond current understanding. It had chosen to use that power with restraint and wisdom, but the choice had been entirely its own. The 847 ships of the Zephyrian fleet were eventually returned to normal space, their crews alive but forever changed by their experience in the dimensional prison where they had been held. Admiral Korath Vex, when he finally stood before the Galactic Senate to give his report, could only say that he had learned the difference between strength and power, between conquest and wisdom. "We went to Earth expecting to find primitives," he testified. "Instead, we found teachers, and the lesson they taught us is one that the galaxy must never forget. True power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to protect." From that day forward, Earth's place in the galactic community was secure, not because of fear, though there was certainly respect for the power that the Watchers represented, but because of understanding. Humanity had proven that they were worthy of the ancient legacy they carried, and the galaxy was better for having learned that lesson. The small blue world continued to spin in its quiet orbit, its people going about their daily lives largely unaware of the cosmic drama that had played out in their defense. And deep beneath the surface of their moon, the heart pulsed gently. The ancient Watchers returning to their patient vigil, ready to wake again if ever their children needed protection. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity, and in learning that respect, they had taken the first step toward becoming worthy of the ancient wisdom that had been protecting them all along.